Counselor. Today is Tuesday, April 24th. We are here with our newer Commissioner, Gail Willett. Welcome, Gail. I'd like to remind folks that this is a public hearing. It is both being recorded and broadcast on RCN Channel 82, Comcast Channel 8, and Verizon 1964. I'd ask folks to silence their electronic devices. The conclusion of the departmental presentation and questions and answers from my colleagues. We will take public testimony. There is a sign-in sheet to my left. We ask that you state your name, affiliation, and residence, and check the box if you do wish to testify. This budget review will encompass over 36 hearings over the next several weeks. We strongly encourage residents, whether here in the chamber or at home, to take a moment to be engaged in this process by giving testimony for the record. You can do this in several ways. Come to one of the 36 hearings and give public testimony. Come to the hearing dedicated to public testimony on Tuesday, June 5th, anytime between 2 to 6 p.m. And also you can send by mail to the Committee on Ways and Means, City Council, 1 City Hall Plaza, Boston City Hall, Boston 02201, or email ccc.wm@boston.gov. I am joined by my colleagues in order of their arrival. Councilor Tim McCarthy to my left, Councilor Josh Zakem, and Councilor Ed Flynn to my far left, and to my immediate right, Councilor Matt O'Malley. We are here to review the Assessing Department as it pertains to dockets 0559 through 0563, orders for the FY19 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations, annual appropriation for the school department, appropriation for other post-employment benefits, appropriation for certain transportation and public realm improvements, and appropriation for certain park improvements. Dockets 0564 and 0565. Capital budget appropriations, including loan orders and lease and purchase agreements. Once again, I want to welcome you, Commissioner, to your first official City Council hearing, and I'll hand it over to you for your presentation.
Oh, thank you very much. I want to thank you for inviting me to the budget hearing. For the record, I'm Gail Willett, the Commissioner of the Assessing Department. I'm here today to present the 2019 budget recommendations for the Assessing Department. As a new Commissioner, I'm looking forward to working with the City Council. As been the case in the past, the Assessing Department will continue to provide excellent customer service in responding to constituent issues and questions. The Assessing Department is responsible for determining the taxable value for all real estate in the city. This includes vehicle and boat excise taxes, as well as personal property valuations. Challenges the department is facing is keeping up with an active real estate market to determine full and fair cash values for property. This is needed for us to achieve Department of Revenue certification, and that allows us to mail out the third quarter bills that go out in January. Also, the department is in the process of a CAMA conversion. CAMA system is our computerized valuation system that helps us determine property values across the city. Our current system is reaching the end of its useful life. We've chosen a new vendor, and it's been budgeted for, and the planned conversion will coincide with our next revaluation in fiscal 2020. The department continues to work on improving the accuracy of our assessments. The FY18 abatements are at an all-time low. This also carries over to our appeals numbers, which is helpful for freeing money from the overlay account for the city's use. With these remarks complete, I now turn the floor over to you, Councillor.
Thank you, Commissioner. And let me recognize that we've since been joined by Councillor at Large Anissa Sabi-George. I see that the budget's increased by little over $250,000. Can you speak to the increase for next year?
Oh, I can. So the increase is collective bargaining and step increases. The department has 3 unions, and all 3 contracts have been settled.
Great. So I'm assuming the staffing level is flat.
I believe it is, yes.
Great. Okay. And can you speak a little bit to, we had our budget overview, and obviously we rely heavily on the property tax, and we're talking about the new growth versus, you know, the existing tax base. Can you speak a little to that as well?
Sure. So new growth certainly makes up a huge part of what the money that the city collects. Last year, new growth was a record high of $77 million. And this year, we're predicting $55 million. We are conservative with the estimates. That is to make sure that as markets turn, we are being conservative and not finding ourselves at the end of the budgeting year with not having enough money there. So we're certainly in a robust market. There is lots of new growth that is coming from all the new construction in the city. About 80% of the new construction is residential, which is certainly in keeping with the mayor's goals of increasing housing in the city. You know, certainly for fiscal 19, we certainly expect this to continue.
Great. And before I hand it over, I think Councilor O'Malley will like this. I think the home rule petition that I filed at the State House, with some help maybe, to get it passed, will allow for the residential exemption to be applied for twice a year, so that some folks, especially new first-time home buyers, won't have to wait sometimes up to as much as 18 months to realize that $2,500 tax credit, basically. So I look forward to working with you to, you know, get that passed soon.
As do I.
Great. Councilor McCarthy.
Hi, thank you, Commissioner. I mean, I just gave you a promotion, I think. Councilor Siomo, Commissioner Willett, welcome. Welcome
Thank you.
aboard. I usually ask the same question, especially at the overview about the pilot. As you know, as well as I do, 70% of our budget this year is made up of property taxes, and we depend on some of our colleges and universities to help us out. Can you just give me a ballpark of where everybody is and drill in a little bit of who's giving and who's lacking?
Well, I mean, so the pilot results are posted on our website. The fiscal 17 is what we have the most current posted. The educational institutions, the medical institutions are certainly higher payers than the cultural institutions, but the majority of all of the 3 types of institutions do give community benefit credits, or do give community benefits, even if they are less than their cash pilot or no money on the cash pilot. But certainly the hospitals are the highest payers. Educational institutions are probably second, and the cultural would be third. I think the cultural institutions, part of it is just having a different economic basis than the medical and the educational, but you know, we certainly have a lot of community benefits that are coming through to the city. And that certainly has a value. I mean, the cash payments are awfully nice, but the community benefits are helpful, especially to schools or to Boston Public Health Commission.
Yeah. Well, I do applaud the mayor in his effort to make the educational institutions have more scholarships available for our youngest and certainly some of our most vulnerable population who are having trouble swinging college. So it's important. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Zakem.
I just want to echo Councilor McCarthy's comments on the pilot payments. It's an ongoing issue, certainly in many of the neighborhoods I represent, although Councilor McCarthy's checks that go to Wentworth, and Wentworth is actually a pretty good one when it comes to pilot payments. So thank you, Councilor McCarthy, for that pass-through to help the Mission Hill neighborhoods. I do just want to, you know, on a more serious note, when it comes to the pilot payments, I think everyone on this body is ready to be advocates and to work with you and your department to put the pressure, we know it's a voluntary program, on these institutions. They do bring a lot to our city, culturally, economically, and I'm thrilled that we have so many nonprofit institutions here, but they do also draw on our resources, and I think the pilot program, as I've said over and over again, is a very fair assessment based on all the intangibles that they bring here, as well as what the city expends on that. So I reiterate that, you know, partnership we've had with this body, your department, the mayor's office, to make sure that we get what we can from the pilot program. And thank you for all your work.
Absolutely. I also did want to note that the mayor has brought in a new liaison to work with the pilots through his office, Casey Brock Wilson, who gives us another dimension in reaching out to the participants.
Great, thanks. Counselor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Sciammo. I just wanted to follow up on my colleagues' questioning on pilots. Are we able to get any data, maybe at a later time, but specifically with the colleges, universities, and hospitals, what type of benefits they are providing and the success of those programs? Instead of just getting a piece of paper saying they're doing this, can we measure it and see what the success of that program is?
Yes, I know that right now what we're just putting out for the community benefits is essentially the credit amount. What we have been talking about with Casey Brock Wilson from the mayor's office is putting out the actual benefits themselves on our website and a cash equivalent to those. So that's something that we're working on now. It's something I could certainly put together for you for at a later point in time.
Thank you, and I was curious about it because the Boston Public Schools was testifying earlier, and for many of the schools, we have 0.5 nurses that are in our schools. But can our hospitals that pay no taxes, can they be doing something more to helping our students in terms of medical care inside the Boston Public School system?
I think that's an interesting idea and probably something that would also be worth pursuing with Boston Public Health Commission.
And I guess my final question is, can you talk about the assistance your office gives to disabled veterans that own a home?
Yes. So there's the veterans exemption, which is called the 22E. And so for that, it is an amount that is tied to disability amounts. So it is getting paperwork from the Veterans Administration, which people would bring in. It's something that goes on every year. Someone who has already taken the veterans exemption, we automatically send out paperwork to them the following year. So that it's not something they have to remember to do. It's something that we're automatically doing for them. And then following up with a secondary letter if we do not hear back from them.
In what percentage do you have to be as a disabled veteran to get the assistance?
Let me look at this. I don't know off the top of my head. I think I'd have to look into it. I know it's tied to the letter that comes from the Veterans Administration.
Yeah. Do you think we could, or your office could work with Commissioner Sterling and maybe coordinate with her office in identifying disabled veterans that do own homes and maybe letting them know about the program, giving them an opportunity to participate?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, it's 10%. They have to be at least 10% disabled. 10%. Yes, absolutely. I think that would be a great way for us to continue our outreach on this.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. We've been since joined by Councilor Kim Janey, and Chair recognizes Councilor Matt O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Commissioner. It is great to be with you. Your predecessor, Commissioner Racco, left big shoes to fill, but you've already been filling them wonderfully, and we appreciate your great work with the city. So welcome to your first budget season.
Thank you.
Following up on both the chairman and my good colleague from South Boston's question, I had an individual, I haven't discussed it with you, but I did with Commissioner Racco, on who is a disabled vet. He had a property tax break because of that. He moved, and the much like when the residential exemption, it doesn't move automatically, and there's going to be a year or so, or maybe a year and a half period where he and his wife won't be able to take advantage of that. I assume that would be similar to the efforts that the chairman is working on through a home rule petition, but I think that even seems more immediate as a fix that we want to look at, because you could understand, my wife and I moved, we're not, even though we are full-time residents in our new house, we won't have access to the residential exemption for a while. I think it's a little bit different when we talk about our disabled vets. So I think, would your office be supportive of efforts if we were to expand upon the good work of the chairman to specifically address the disabled veterans tax incentive?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes,
Thank
and
you.
also looking forward to it with the residential exemption. Those are some of the toughest calls we get.
Yeah, I bet, absolutely. Thank you very much. There were 1157 abatement applications in the last fiscal year, FY18.
Correct.
And that is the lowest number of abatement applications for a non-reevaluation year on record?
Yes, or the lowest ever, really.
Why is that, do you think?
I think that we're becoming more accurate in how we're assessing the properties. We're able to take advantage of a lot of tools that we did not have in the past, using MLS, being able to look at listings. Our computer models are certainly becoming more sophisticated. So I think doing the work right the first time is definitely cutting down on our abatements.
That's great.
I think the second thing is just our low appeals numbers is also making a difference, that it means that we've resolved any issues that we had.
That's great. Well, let's keep up the good work on that.
Thank
Are
you.
you using new technology, or is it just that existing technology is more accurate?
Existing technology, better techniques.
Great. Good answer. I wanted to again thank, we don't often do it enough, but Kate Sullivan and the incredible central staff who pour through all these budgets, preparing us for these hearings. And through their good work, I came along line 53700, which is a clothing allowance line. It's increased. It's only a $1,000 increase, which in the grand scheme of things isn't that large. But I'm curious, what does that cover?
So AFSCME had negotiated a clothing allowance. SEIU also did. So what that would cover is our assessors are out in the field. So that would be a boot or a coat allowance, because at all times of the year they are heading out.
That makes sense to me. Good answer. Thank you very much. I think that may all we have for now. You know, what you do is so important. I've said this before to your predecessor. And you and your team, I mean, we don't need to tell you, it is 70% of our budget comes from property taxes, come from your great work. You seldom get the recognition you deserve, but I know you lead a team of incredibly passionate and hardworking individuals. Laura Isberg has been a tremendous resource to my team. I want to especially thank her for her great work, but just everyone's done a great job. So really appreciate continuing to work with you, and thank you for all your efforts. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Asabi George?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. I have a couple of questions on pilot that I'll go through, because I know my colleagues have brought up some important points. How much, I know in 2010, there was a report that said 52% of Boston's land was not taxable. What's the percentage now?
I have the same percent as being 52%. That was as of fiscal 16, but I do not know as of fiscal 18.
I'm curious, because I imagine between 2010 and even 2016 or 2015 for fiscal year 16, that many of our nonprofits in the city, their footprint has grown. So I'm curious as, to the validity of that number, and I think we can look at that offline. I wonder about the growth in value too over the last number of years for our for that property. What has been the increase over time? Because I think the last report that we referenced in preparing for today's hearing referenced 2007 values for most of the colleges and the universities. The 2007 value was $7 billion for colleges and universities, and for hospitals it was about $6 billion. But in the 2017 pilot analysis, the dollar amounts are basically the same. Has the property value been reassessed at all for our nonprofits?
No, my understanding is the agreement that Commissioner Rackow entered into with the pilots was that they would hold those values for 5 years to get them used to making these payments and understanding of what the pilot was going to be doing. And so those have been increased by 2.5% after that point.
So when was the 5 years expired?
I don't know. I'd have to look. I'd have to pull some paperwork to look at that.
Yeah, I'd be interested on what the cycle is, because I feel that we've been, I've been here now 2.5 years, and we haven't looked again at pilot or at those assessments. Whereas, we get calls from residents, both new residents, elderly residents, everyone in the middle, who every year have seen their assessment on their property value increase tremendously. And so as they figure out ways to pay their property tax, which we continue to depend on mostly for our revenue, we need to make sure that our nonprofit partners are also being reassessed. You know, never mind the collection piece, which is also, you know, we can assess them all we want, but if we aren't collecting on it, that's a challenge for us to look at. Regarding, we've talked a lot here about Massport's pilot payments and their contributions to the city as, you know, occupying space. Can you reference their contributions?
For fiscal 17, their pilot payment was 17.9 million. For fiscal 18, their pilot payment is 18.2 million. I know that they have consistently paid their pilot.
And they've fulfilled it, they have been fulfilling it?
Yes, yes. In fact, the pilot payments go out in 2 separate billings. The first bill for fiscal 18 has already been paid.
And then last year, we were going to get an increase because of the expiring 121A on the Renaissance Hotel.
Correct.
And have we seen that, is that a $1 million bump? Is that what we're seeing there?
A $1 million bump,
Well,
I'm sure
just you're saying
where.
the 18.2 is compared to, it's not even $1 million. But where is that increase, or what was that increase from the
Oh,
Renaissance?
no, that's not part of the pilot payment. That was a 121A that expired, so that is separate from the pilot payments. The Renaissance Hotel, let me see if I have it. It did go into the new growth numbers for fiscal 18. Yeah, and all I have in my notes is the, so the commercial 26.5 million in taxes is part of the new growth, and part of that was the Renaissance Hotel, but I don't have with me what the value on the Renaissance Hotel is right now as fully taxable.
Oh, but it's not related to Massport Pilot?
No, it's separate from the pilot. That was a 121A agreement that expired.
On our property, or is that Massport property?
It
the
was a
Renaissance?
lease with Massport for the hotel.
Okay. That might be where my confusion is here. And then my last question, if that's okay, Chairman, is on short-term rentals. We have, you know, that's a conversation that continues here at the council, and the mayor continues to talk about policy. But we have a lot of units across the city and buildings across the city that are not owner-occupied, that are used as short-term rental opportunities. Do we ever look to tax them at a commercial rate as opposed to a residential rate?
I know I have sat in on meetings with the mayor's office about that, but legally we could not do that right now. Those are residential properties, and it's difficult for us to track how often someone is renting something, how much they are renting something. I know when I've done some preliminary looking, a lot of times the addresses are not even listed. Sometimes we find them by neighbors' complaints, which I'm sure that you have heard also.
Yep.
But even then, it is difficult to determine what property it is, how often it is rented, which units it covers in the building, if it's not the entire building. So that's certainly something on our radar, certainly something we've been talking to the mayor about, but no, nothing that we could legally tax them at the commercial rate as a hotel right now.
And then or at a commercial rate, maybe not a hotel rate, but at a commercial rate?
Well, the hotels are at a commercial rate,
Okay.
yeah.
And then if an owner-occupied home share unit was shared out more than the residential exemption, how many, let me back up, I'm sorry. How many days does a owner-occupant need to be in his or her home to qualify for the residential exemption?
There's not a number of days requirement. It is simply that is you own and you occupy the property. So it's not a days, it is determining occupancy, which can certainly be difficult. So a lot of times what we're looking for is where has someone filed their state income taxes for, and that's the guideline that the Department of Revenue has given us. And so that's typically what we're looking for. But, you know, there's certainly lots of people who have a residence here, and maybe they have a residence at the Cape, and it can be difficult to determine where someone resides, but it's not necessarily the number of days that they're staying there is what we're looking for as a guideline.
Great. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Janey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you.
I just want to echo many of the points that were already made around the pilot, so I won't ask additional questions there, but I was wondering if you could tell me what the city already offers in terms of tax relief for our seniors?
Oh, I can. So we have the 41C, which is one of the personal exemptions for seniors. This is for seniors that have reached the age of 65. This is an income and an asset requirement. We also have a
And what's the income, I'm sorry?
Oh,
what's the
sure.
income requirement?
On this gross income not exceeding $24,523 if single, gross income not exceeding $36,785 if married, whole estate, this is excluding the value of the property, not to exceed $40,000 if single or $55,000 if married.
And for the couple, what was the gross again?
$36,785.
And is there any thought to upping that amount so that more folks could qualify for the relief?
So that's something that's set by the state, so something that we would have to go to the legislature to look to have changed. I know last year in reviewing the tapes, Commissioner Rakow had talked about taking into consideration inflation, which I think is a great argument and certainly a way that could be moved up. So something that I want to look into based on seeing the conversation from last year.
And are there other ways that seniors could take advantage of different programs that would offer tax relief for some other kinds of relief in terms of the assessment of their property?
Certainly there's a 17D, which is less restrictive than the 41C, that just is a age and an estate requirement. That's for anyone over 70. There's also the deferrals. So this year was the first, previously we've had deferrals that are for age 65 and over, where homeowners can defer their taxes at a 4% interest rate. And then starting this year was the first year that we had it lowered as part of a home rule petition to 55 years of age so that someone could defer their taxes. It's a wonderful way for homeowners that are house rich and pocket poor to be able to stay in their houses.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Just to wrap up, the 4%, is that also dictated by state law, or do we have any flexibility with the 4% rate?
I'm not sure. I believe that it used to be 8%, maybe
That's right.
10 years ago, and I do not know if it was a city council change or a state change. I can certainly look into that.
Yeah, and the reason I ask, I just recently was looking at other cities and towns that have a deferral program, and I believe, it might have been Newton or Brookline is a 1%. And I think, with interest rates so low still on the borrowing side, but also on the earning side, we might want to consider that if that's an option.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was an interesting article that was in the Globe,
Yeah.
and I didn't realize that there was someone who was less than 4
Yeah,
also.
I didn't
Yeah.
either. I thought 4 was a pretty good deal, but then.
Yeah, no, I did too.
And then just, I think Ron used to be able to tell us what the average tax bill is for a resident homeowner in the city of Boston.
Oh, sure. So the average single-family property tax bill remains low at $3,324, certainly very competitive with the surrounding towns to Boston.
Right. Well, certainly the surrounding towns, but I think we are probably in the lower end, like lower 6th, 10 percentile or something?
I don't.
Average tax bill?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I know when the Globe publishes surrounding towns, we are always at the bottom.
Right.
Part of it is the increase in the residential exemption rate from 30 to 35% that happened 2 years ago. So right now we're at $2,538 for the
Right.
residential exemption for fiscal 18, which I know for a lot of taxpayers is, half their bill.
That's right, especially with the valuations going up so dramatically, especially the past 3 years. And just last question, I know a lot of it is made about pilots, and I believe our nonprofit partners should be paying more. But I would also say that when I first arrived here, I think the total pilot payment to the city was in the $35 million range, of which half of that was Massport. Can you tell us what the total revenue from pilots is projected for next year, I guess?
So I don't have the fiscal 18 numbers with me. I have the fiscal 17 numbers. And so between cash and community benefits, 84.7 million.
Okay. What's just the revenue part? Is it half? It's half?
32.4 is the cash payments, and
Okay.
52.3 is the community benefits portion.
Gotcha. And that's less the Massport?
That's not including the Massport. That's simply the entities that are part of the regular pilot program. The Massport is kind of a separate type.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Nice to have you before us today. We look forward to seeing you in the future. And if nobody else has any questions, this hearing stands adjourned.
Thank you.
4th, and we are here regarding the Community Preservation Committee and Docket 0583, message and order for an appropriation order in the amount of $759,663 for the administrative and operating expenses of the City of Boston Preservation Committee for fiscal year 2019, and a future appropriation order in the amount of $21,200,262 from the Community Preservation Fund's estimate annual revenues fiscal year 2019 to be appropriated and reserved for future appropriations. I am joined by several of my colleagues, I believe in order of their arrival. Councilor Anissa Sabi George to my right, Councilor Matt O'Malley to my immediate right, and to my far left, Councilors Ed Flynn and Josh Zakem, as well as Council President Andrea Campbell. I want to welcome Christine and Emma back before us, and have at it.
Good afternoon, Chairman Siomo, members of the City Council. Thank you for having me again. My name is Emma Handy. I'm the Chief of Administration and Finance and the CFO for the City of Boston. With me today is Christine Poff. She's the Director of the Community Preservation Committee. We are particularly excited to be here today to talk about the opportunity that the Community Preservation Act presents for significant investment in the City of Boston in affordable housing, historic preservation, parks, and open space. The CPA is expected to generate $18 million for the city in FY18 and is projected to generate approximately $100 million over the next 5 years for the city. The Community Preservation Fund was created upon the adoption of the Community Preservation Act in November 2016. FY18 is the first year of the fund, and Christine will talk more about the first round of funding that is currently accepting applications. The initiative is funded by the 1% property tax-based surcharge on both residential and business property tax bills, as well as an annual state distribution from the Massachusetts Community Preservation Trust Fund. The state match for FY19 was recently announced, and it will be an 11.5% match. The general laws provide that in each fiscal year, the council will make annual appropriations from the fund and as it deems necessary for the administrative and operating expenses of the Community Preservation Committee. These appropriations will not exceed 5% of the fund's annual revenues. Today, we are asking that you review an appropriation order before you that consists of two components. One is for the administrative budget, and the second is for the appropriated reserve. The appropriated reserve will put funding into the Community Preservation Fund so that when projects are approved, we will return to the council and ask that the council votes to approve those projects. And as I mentioned, Christine will talk exactly about where we are in that process and that first round of funding that we anticipate, which we anticipate the CPC will vote on in June, and then we will return to the council for actual appropriation of individual projects. These orders are just to sort of seed the reserve so that the funding is available for FY19. So with that, I will turn it over to Christine and have her review the details of community preservation budget.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emma. And first, I do want to thank the councilors. I've worked with all of you doing community forums to let community members know in your districts and across the city about the Community Preservation Fund and that they can apply and how to apply. And we've been supporting a lot of different organizations and groups in their application process. What we're doing, sort of how it's rolling out and how we've initiated, the committee decided to do a pilot program this spring. A small bucket of funding that will go out to projects that are shovel ready, really ready to go into the ground this summer and require $500,000 or less to finish a project. The deadline is this coming Friday. We've talked to well over 50 groups and projects. We do not know if they'll all come in on Friday and if all of them are quite ready, but it's exciting to think that we could have some ribbon cuttings as early as September. Yeah. I think that's, I could walk through the budget. Is that helpful?
No, that's okay. We'll open it up to questions. Thank you. The match part, 11 point, I think we all anticipated that it wasn't going to be as robust as in years past. But if I recall correctly, we kind of always estimated that we'd be getting 20 million, but it seemed to be more in the realm of like, 15 million from the city and 5 million, and it looks like we're barely getting half of that, right, for a match. So it seems like we overperformed on our estimate from what we're getting from the taxpayers. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you want me to, because I've been following the state match, obviously, closely. What's happened is more and more, 174 cities and towns across the state have passed CPA in their city or town. And Boston and Springfield passed it at the same time. And so adding two big cities like that means that the match is a static amount. It doesn't change. And there's no, it doesn't go up every year based on inflation or cost of living or any of those things. It's $20 is filed at the Registry of Deeds every time property changes hands in the state. And so because that has not changed, the static amount of money just goes down as more and more cities and towns are asking for the match. There's been a lot of legislative work to try and increase that $20 fee that's paid, and it has not happened yet. There was an amendment in the budget that was proposed by one of the Boston delegates this time around that I think was withdrawn. So, we hope at some point that will change. And the goal is to get everybody's match up to 30% from 11.5.
Okay.
I would just add to that obviously having the CPA funded on the city side as a surcharge related to property taxes gives us a little bit more insight and certainty around what that city portion is. And given the fact that, over recent history, the state funding has come really from consolidated net surplus at the end of the state fiscal year, has created some uncertainty around what that state match will be.
Right, and to speak to the legislation Christine's talking about, I know that there's an effort by, I believe, Councilor Edwards to help support that effort to increase or change the formula by which we add to the CPA funding. So with that, let me recognize Councilor Nisa Sabi-George.
I'm okay with questions, thank you.
Great.
All right, I guess, let me just say, I'm just excited. This has been a really good couple of months preparing for this first round of applications. I know the communities are really excited where you've had your presentations, and that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emma, great to be with you as always. To my dear friend and neighbor, Christine Poff, congratulations on a great job that you've done with your time. I'm obviously delighted that we are at this point, and kudos to the council president and Councilor Flaherty for their great efforts in getting this on the ballot and passed. So are you fully staffed up now, Christine?
We are for the present.
And how big is your staff?
3 people,
So
including
yourself,
myself.
and then what are the other positions?
One is the assistant director, Thaddeus Brown, and the other is operations manager.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And is there any talk of growing the staff as things go on underway?
I think this pilot is going to tell us a lot
Fair.
in terms of how, and that's really we're happy for the pilot because we get to evaluate our systems and our process and the application materials and our staffing, and we hope the community will be happy because they'll start to see some projects.
That's right.
So we'll know more. In the budget, there's room for additional staff if needed.
Good. And you also have your contracted services line increased. Which services do you contract out?
So we had anticipated that we may need to contract for language interpretation and community work.
For these meetings that you've
right,
been
for
doing.
these meetings, for forums and engagement and support of groups applying for projects. That was one of the contracted pieces. And then the other piece was a lot of community groups have come to us with ideas, but really don't know how to implement. So we have money for a landscape architect, for affordable housing developer consultant who can work with a group to help them put together a package and identify who they should be working with to make that happen. If it's city land, it could be the Parks Department, et cetera. So that was our original budget, and then the Community Preservation Committee asked us to increase that so that we could have money to hire an outside evaluator if needed.
Great.
Yeah.
Do members of the committee receive any stipend for their work?
None.
Okay.
They're all volunteers.
All volunteers, thank you. And it says in these, in this packet that the CPA's administrative budget was about 3.5%, a little less than that, 3.46% of total revenue. Is that on par with other municipalities?
Most municipalities use the full 5%.
Really?
But they have a smaller amount of money that they take in, and they need some comparable staffing. I mean,
Yeah.
Boston is much bigger than anywhere else, including Springfield, but,
Do any cities or towns have staffs bigger than 3?
oh, no.
Good, okay. And then finally, just want to echo the point, that with 174 cities and towns now participating in CPA, that's great, but it looks to me that unless we have some reform at the state level,
Right.
we're at the tipping point where it is no longer as an effective tool for cities and towns to use.
Right. Well, I mean, no one's going to sneeze at $20 million for these
course.
important projects, so it's incredibly meaningful. It's hard to say it's the match may be not so effective.
I think that was my, yeah, you are.
The fund is going to make a huge difference in Boston.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I'll temper my remarks to say, or alter my remarks to say, the state match, a large part of why this passed so overwhelmingly when
Right.
17 or 16 years earlier it failed at the ballot box, I think was a deliberate and successful campaign by YBB and others to explain why this works and the fact that we were
Right.
sending money to the state that we weren't seeing. So
Right.
I would just associate myself with remarks from others that we need to do everything we can to fix this at the state level to make sure we can have more money coming to cities,
That'd be
towns,
great.
particularly Boston. So thank
Yeah.
you for the great work you both do. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Council Siomo. Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Christine. And Christine, we had several meetings over the last several months in South Boston, Old Colony Development, the South End at Villa Victoria. We have one tonight at Fort Point. I know we have one scheduled for Chinatown over the next 2 months or so. And I always enjoyed working with you. You're very professional and dedicated. In Chinatown, it has very few parks. I'm working with the Parks and Recreation now on hopefully a long-term plan for Chinatown. But could you work with us to make sure that Chinatown also gets its fair share of
absolutely.
services?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I've heard from some Chinatown representatives is a focus on affordable housing, but clearly parks also is of interest, and I've been working with some groups to help with the D&D real estate people to figure out where there might be land that could become even a small pocket park. And so there's all kinds of ways that we can tap into the potential and figure that out. And those projects that take that kind of planning where it's a great idea but it's not in place yet, those are a year or two down the road, but I think we'll really see a difference in those 2 years.
Okay, and when you meet with D&D, could you let me know, and I'd love to attend the meeting
Sure,
if
great.
possible?
Yeah,
All right, thank you, Christine.
good.
Flynn. Councilor Zakem. Good. Councilor Campbell.
Thank you, Councilor Siomo, and thank you to, and Christine, thank you for your hard work. I see you in the community at so many different meetings, letting folks know about the benefits of the CPA and, of course, the importance of the continued advocacy at the state level to increase the match. My questions have been answered. I simply wanted to say thank you for the hard work. And thank you, Emma, as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Janey.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Emma. I'm really, really excited about the pilot and was just hoping that you could give us more of an in-depth update about the pilot and what's happening.
So we have 2 applications so far. We will know so much more Friday at 5 o'clock.
When you get at the deadline?
Yeah, because I think we have really encouraged people to fill out. For the first sort of 6 months that I was on board, I had a project interest form up online, and then once we had decided on the pilot, we put up an eligibility form that had a little more detail, and anybody who did a project interest form, we contacted them directly to talk through their project and see if they were eligible, and then eligibility form 2. People, we came back to them, and we were evaluating eligibility in 2 ways. One was to make sure that they fit into the state law and the requirements and the sort of boundaries that the state law creates with this program, and then to make sure that they were really shovel-ready for the pilot. Because well, I should have said that in the fall, we did the pilot very purposefully in conjunction with an announcement that we would have a fall round of funding so that people who weren't quite ready could know there's something else coming down the pike quickly. And we don't know exactly what the rounds of funding will look like going forward, but we're hoping two application periods a year. We just have to figure that the pilot's going to help us figure that out.
Wonderful. And did you say earlier that June they would be notified?
We're trying to have contracts signed with those who are receiving funds by the end of the fiscal year. And I've been working with, I've talked to Councilor Campbell and Councilor Flaherty in the hopes that the vote from there can be a public hearing and a vote by the council at the end of June, before the close of your session, fiscal year session.
Well, it's very exciting. Thank you
Yeah,
for your
thank you.
work. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Everybody good? Thank you. Well, thanks again. I think this is a great new development for our city. I would just ask, you did mention that legislation or amendment to the budget has been withdrawn.
I understand that, and I don't understand why. I've emailed, maybe
Interesting.
Neil's office can help
Did.
explain at
Okay.
some point.
We'll get that offline.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then just one last, I brought this up when Councilor Campbell and Councilor Flaherty brought this to the full council, that we have the ability to actually contribute more funds through IDP.
You do. Absolutely.
It's something we should consider as, a way to get more of that match money, I
Right.
guess. But I'll leave it for
Right.
today, and this hearing stands adjourned.